Hi everyone, welcome back to my podcast, The Helpline. I'm Seema Anand and I'm joined today by Shankar Jalota, who is a vitiligo advocate and is here to talk to us today about the issues that people can face with relationships, with life, with love generally,
Absolutely.
when you have a condition like vitiligo. Thank you so much for coming on to be with us and to chat to us today.
Thank you for having me.
So I met Shankar the first time when he actually wrote this book called The Vitiligo Man, and it's a children's book.
Yeah, it's a children's book about a boy called Awais who has the skin condition vitiligo, and in the book you see his journey about how he embraces his vitiligo as his superpower.
You know what? I was so happy when I saw this book because this is something that we never talk about. We don't tell kids how to deal with it if you get it, but we also don't tell other children how to react to somebody who's got it. And I say this because Shankar and I had this chat a while ago that when I was a child, I actually developed vitiligo. And I went through many years of treatment and all sorts of different treatments, which did end up with me actually not having it anymore. I was very, very fortunate. But I also know the kind of impact that it has on your life because of the way other people react to you. So thank you for that book. I think that was very, very needed.
Thank you.
So today's podcast came about because I had a message from a young man saying that he has vitiligo. He's in a relationship, but he hasn't had the nerve to have sex yet with his partner because he's a little embarrassed. He's scared at what she might think when she looks at him down there, because he also has some vitiligo patches on his genitals. And I was just thinking, we get so many messages from women, from young women saying, I'm conscious because I have dark patches on my inner thighs, it doesn't look perfect. And we make so much of an effort to reach out to them and to put them at their ease. We don't do that enough for young men. And we certainly don't do it for people with vitiligo. And I think that it's about time that we started. And so I reached out to Shankar and I said, would you mind coming and talking to us about the sort of things that you have to go through and how to help yourself come out of it? So that's where it started from. But Shankar, before we start, can we explain to people what vitiligo is?
Absolutely. So vitiligo is a skin condition that affects the pigment on the skin, meaning that there's no melanin to actually colour the skin. Now it's really predominant in the Asian or ethnic minority sort of community, and they say between 1 to 3% of the world's population actually have vitiligo.
Really?
Yes. So it's interesting, right? Because although that doesn't sound like a lot, it also is as well. But you can't catch vitiligo, and I know we'll go into a bit more details about those myths later on. But it's really key that.
So do we have an understanding of why it develops?
We don't. What we do know is that it's an autoimmune disease. Now, for myself, no one in my family has vitiligo. None of my grandparents had vitiligo, so it has just sort of come out of nowhere. It can also be hereditary as well. So if someone in your family did have vitiligo before, there is a possibility that it can get passed along down the line, although there's no certainty around that.
Okay. And when did you first develop vitiligo?
So I first developed vitiligo when I was around 15 years old.
Okay.
And it started off just as like a small speck on my chest and just under my eye. And I generally thought I wasn't cleaning myself properly. So I was in the shower really scrubbing, thinking, oh God, like it's like bacteria or something. And over a small amount of time, it sort of grew. Until one day I was prancing around the living room with my top off, and my gran noticed this white patch on my chest and said, you need to go to the doctor straight away. And it was as if she'd seen it before. And lo and behold, I went to the doctor, and although they didn't initially first diagnose it as vitiligo, the second time around they said, you've got vitiligo and there's no cure. So it's quite a big thing for a teenager to hear.
It is. It's actually really scary, isn't it, to be told there's no cure. I think that's the scary part of it.
It's realism. But when you're a teenager, I can honestly say it didn't mean anything. It was just like numb words, because I feel like at that age you don't understand impacts of future life. You just think, you go to the doctor, you take your medication and everything would be okay again.
Mm-hmm.
But in these circumstances, it actually got worse over time, not better.
Yeah. So mine started the very first time, I think I was 5 years old, and it started on my ankle. So I had a little tiny dot on my ankle and a little tiny dot here by the eyes. And that's where it generally starts, right? I was told at that point that it generally either starts on the eye or the ankle. That's the starting point.
So I think there's different myths around that as well. It's really interesting to sort of debug them as well. So it can technically start anywhere on your body. But there can be more prominent areas, right? So some of the areas can be, like you said, under your eye and ankles and under the armpit as well. But generally speaking, it can just start anywhere around your body.
So just very, very quickly before we actually go into all the questions that I have for you, would you mind sharing a little bit of your personal journey with vitiligo with us? Like, I just want to know how, as you got more aware of what it was, how it impacted you personally.
So when I first got vitiligo, and let's say I got diagnosed with it, one of the first things I did was I Googled it. And I think that was, although, well, it was probably the worst thing I could have done, because I clicked on Google Images and I saw the severity of where my vitiligo could go. But at that time I thought, oh my God, no, that is what's going to happen to me. And not that that's wrong, but as a fearful teenager, I was like, oh my God, this is what's going to happen to me. What do I do? So one of the first things after that I did was try to find a cure. So I typed in like vitiligo cure, and you'd be amazed about what spam is on the internet, what false promises, what marketing absolute BS is out there. Because companies take advantage of emotional people, and there were definitely creams out there being, targeted at for like $500, let's say, to say, oh, this will cure your vitiligo. But then, lo and behold, when you actually look at the reviews, it's all false.
Yeah.
But around that time, when I went back to the doctor, they put me on like light therapy. So I literally stood naked in a machine to get UV rays, and I used to travel up to London. I'm talking, I'd be in this machine for like 3 seconds, and then the next time be 7 seconds, and the next time be 12 seconds. But I'd be going all the way to London just to do that. But I was so desperate, right, to find the cure that I'd find. My dad went to India and brought back literally like a clear plastic bag of white tablets and was like, this will cure your vitiligo. And I was like, no, thank you. Although I was desperate, I was like, I don't trust that. There was no medical thing on it at all. I had homeopathic treatment. I'd see if my 7 chakras were aligned. And although they weren't aligned, let's say, it still didn't solve the problem after they tried to do that. But I was desperate. I was so desperate. But a turning point was, so I used to wear makeup, I should add that. And makeup for a guy is already it's absolutely accepted now. As a teenager and as a boy, I never saw it out there in the mainstream. So it was, again, oh no, it's another thing that I'm different about. I have to wear makeup to cover it. There's actually nothing wrong with that. It helped me get out of the house. I was just so ashamed of it, wrongly. But I'll go
I know, but you know what? My heart goes out to that 15-year-old
Yeah.
who's going through that, because we know now that it's wrong to be ashamed of it, that there's nothing to be ashamed
Absolutely.
of. But at that point, you really don't. And I just, it makes me well up. It really makes me want to cry when I think of what you would have felt and gone through. And
I appreciate. Do you know what? You think back to those times and you think it's not out there. It wasn't in the media. There was no positive advocates or advocacy as much as there is now. And I'm not talking about like Winnie Harlow, for example, fantastic model with vitiligo. But when you looked at fashion and advertising back then, it was very like classic Love Island type. Everyone was picture perfect. When actual real beauty is you and I. It's everyone. It's what makes us human. And that didn't exist back then.
no.
And it's starting to exist now, but there's still a long way to go.
So at what point or how long did it take for you to sort of come to some kind of inner comfort?
So it took me years, and it was purely by accident. So I was staying at a friend's house in London, and I reached into my bag to get my makeup out, and lo and behold, I forgot my makeup at home. So I had the choice to basically go into work that day, or not going at all. And I remember a distinct moment where I stared in the mirror, And I was saying to myself, come on, Shanka, you can do this, you can go in. And it took me about half an hour to come to terms with like, I'm going to go into work and face the world for the first time naked. Because without that makeup, I may as well have been naked, because that's how it made me feel. And then when I went in, it wasn't as bad as I thought. Now, people did ask questions, people were curious, I looked different. Oh, hang on a second, are you okay? Like, and I just took that as a chance to educate them about, oh yeah, I've got vitiligo, this is what it is, you know, you can't catch it. And from that day, I never wore makeup again. Although it was really hard, so it's not as straightforward as that.
No, it's never as straightforward as that, but it is a journey, and it's never that easy to give it up, because you feel really brave one day and then the next day you're like, no, I can't take it, I can't take it. So yeah, it kind of goes up and down. So what made you write the book?
What made me write the book was this is quite deep. So in COVID, I think everyone had too much time on their hands. And what I found was that I was reflecting on my past a lot. And one of the things I didn't like about my past through my reflection was that I didn't accept who I was sooner. And then I thought, why didn't I accept myself sooner for who I was? And it was because I found that there's no materials or education around there about celebrating, you know, visible differences now in general. So this is where the adventure of the Vitiligo Man was born. So
it's incredible book, which I really want people to see again, because I think it's really, really important. I think it's brilliant.
No, honestly, thank you. Like, so the premise of the book was, I really want kids to embrace who they are, especially at a young age. Because what I found, and this is like, so I'm in therapy now, for example, and what I find with that is everything is linked back to my childhood.
Okay.
And I mean that not negatively. I mean that as it's a part of our course, our foundation. So imagine that I can create a children's book that can help build a child's foundation strongly to be more open and accepting of the world as it is, and see that beauty is a mixture of things, mixture of people, of course vitiligo being one of those differences.
Yeah, and just to say that I am going to become a grandmother for the first time in a couple of months, and that particular book is going to be part of my little granddaughter's first collection of reading material, because it's so important for children to just grow up knowing about these things.
Okay.
So, okay, well, is there a time when you thought, this is going to impact my romantic life? Like, nobody is gonna want to be with me because of this.
So yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I don't think I got into my first like serious relationship until like my early 20s.
Okay.
And developing vitiligo at 15 now to my early 20s is about 5-6 years, right? And there's a large part of me that was afraid to show, you know, the other person who I was, what my vitiligo is, and the fear that comes around that as well. Because again, normal, I didn't think I was normal.
Yeah. And
so letting someone into that degree was a real vulnerability, especially when my self-esteem was as low as what it was.
And when you did finally get into that, because like you said, nothing, you know, we feel we take one step forward. When we tell it to the world, it feels like, okay, you kind of made that leap of faith, and then it all worked. And of course, nothing is as simple as that. No. So you finally decide that, okay, you are worthy of somebody being in love with you or having a relationship.
Yeah.
And so you are with somebody.
Yeah.
And then what? Like, okay, somebody is now fallen for you, or that's a strange old-fashioned word, but okay, somebody feels that they like you enough to want to be with you.
Yeah.
But there is still that thing of, you take off your clothes.
Yeah.
And what are they going to see, and how will they react?
Absolutely.
And we have a real discomfort around, already we have a discomfort around our bodies, and then add to that, you have white patches, and then you think that's going to make it worse. So talk to me a little bit about that.
So I remember moments with like past partners where the fear was so real that before we even got intimate, before I, let's say, even open up, so it could be like a first date or second date, I knew they could see it around my eye, but everything else was a secret because, you know, I'm covered up. So I had to have like a serious chat in my eyes, about saying, hey, just so you know, I've got vitiligo on my chest and on my back and in other areas, and I kind of want you to know that, because if you're not okay with that, that's okay that you're not okay with it, but it's different. And I was like quite surprised that at the time that people came back, or these people that I was dating were like, no, that's okay, that's absolutely fine, and they're actually quite accepting of it. But the fear was still there. And I say that importantly because a lot of our fear is self-driven. It comes from our own mental state. Now, there are mean people out there in the world.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the world is not always pretty, but a lot of it is what's driven within, because of what we see and what we perceive in the world. It's not necessarily right. It's just that, and when you put yourself out there, sometimes you'll be amazed about, oh, actually, it's not as bad as you think it is.
But also, I think because we don't get to see enough images of people with differences.
Yeah.
We just don't, unfortunately. The magazines do not carry that. Media doesn't carry. They'll have the one-off person, but it's not something that you see regularly.
No.
I think that, yes, if you have a condition that you think is different, it's going to make you feel awkward. And equally, the other person, a future partner, looking at you will also get a little bit of shock. It's also natural for them to maybe think, ooh, maybe if they've had a chance to chat, that's different.
Yeah.
I mean, I always just think, how would somebody react to certain things about my body? For instance, I have a lot of facial hair. And I still remember my first date with my husband, my now husband. I still remember we went to this nightclub, and I said to him, because I was so embarrassed that even after I'd sort of removed my facial hair, there was still the stubble that you could feel. And I still remember talking to him and saying, I just want to tell you that I've got this, and are you going to be able to take me with that? Are you comfortable with that? And I know now that it does not make a difference. Yeah, it might feel a little bit strange because you're expecting smoother skin and somebody doesn't get that, but I know it doesn't make any difference to who I am or our relationship. But at that point, you don't know.
No. When you say that, what screams out to me is courage, because the courage it takes you to open up in that way, whereas others wouldn't find that as easy, and it would have taken you time possibly to get to that point to be able to open up.
Maybe, but I think also, the fact that we have been taught to believe that this is not okay and hence it has to be somehow justified.
Yeah.
I think that's so sad.
That is sad, and I think what's wrong with the world is there's not consistency of positive things. Like, there's not consistency of seeing the right images all the time. There's not consistency of celebrating diversity, celebrating differences, or actual beauty. Let's say if there was, I don't think there'd be as much of a problem as that still exists. There shouldn't be a stigma, but there is.
Yeah.
And if we had consistency, because what I mean by that is, you see fashion industries, you see advertisements do one-off things as campaigns.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's beautiful, it's amazing. But then they move on to the next thing. There's not consistency.
Yeah.
And if they're always like, oh, come on.
And they move on to even going back to the same old sort of stereotype as opposed to moving forward with the campaign. So, which makes me want to ask, how much of the fear comes from your own self-perception versus what you think other people will think?
So I think it's mixed. I think that a lot of it is internal and mental, and I think that's because of what we absorb in the world around us. But equally, I can also give examples, for example, of when people have been mean. Remember, when you look different, unfortunately, people stare. People make nasty comments. There can be bullying because you look different, and that's really unfair, especially when you're young.
Yeah.
Right. And that will shape you into having a perception of the world that's wrong. That will then all of a sudden you're in it yourself. Your self-esteem is going to be low. So there's a balance between the two. I'd say it is more, if you like, for example, if you can conquer your own mental, let's say, acceptance, which is a journey and it can take a long time. If you're willing to be patient with yourself and give yourself self-love every day and just trust the process, you can get to a point of acceptance for yourself. Now, with the noise in the outside and the externals, which absolutely exists, if you can also hold your head above it, and by all means, back yourself, stick up for yourself. If especially if someone's being confrontational or horrible, but equally, imagine there's a bubble around it, and you're just pushing it away, or like popping it. It doesn't exist, because you are who you are, and that's such a beautiful thing. Like the fact that we're here, like being able to have this conversation, it's incredible, So yeah, that's what I'd say.
I must tell you, with me, what happened. So I had vitiligo up to the age of approximately 15. And it's that time when, or 16, 15, 16. And it's that time, where you're sort of coming into being a young woman. There are guys around you that you like. There's that whole sort of self-awareness going on, right? And then you come into this world, and I'm talking about, I am now 62, so I'm talking about a very long time ago when there was no awareness of anything that was different. And I was living in Punjab during those years, because that's where my treatment was taking place. They're not known for their diplomacy. Let's put it that way. I can imagine. Yeah. And I still remember, I was just thinking back to when you were talking. I remember this level of hating yourself for this, almost as a self-defense mechanism. That if I can dislike this so much about myself, if somebody else is mean and says, "Oh, I don't like this about you," it's going to be nothing compared to what I think about myself. And it was my way of coping with the hurt. Like, yeah, you can't hurt me as much as I'm hurting myself. I already hate me.
Wow, yeah.
And, and there was nobody we could go and talk to at that point. There was no therapy. There was nobody sort of saying, this doesn't matter, you're still great. There was literally no other option but to deal with it yourself. Like, literally come to grips with this.
And when you say young, like you said, your natural coping mechanisms come out, but those natural coping mechanisms are an internal thing, right?
And you get people around you saying, you get literally the whole thing, must have been the sins of your past life.
The culture.
Yeah. All of those wonderful things come up. So it was just a really difficult time. So I guess what I want to ask you is that, were you more afraid of being seen physically, or was it more that you were going to be judged on an emotional level? Like, was it the fact that people were going to look at you and maybe in your mind put you down, or was it going to be that, oh, this person, there must be something not nice about them as well? I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes absolute sense. Thing is, so when you mentioned a point about culture there, and that is where I did get really fearful of how others judge me, because in like our culture, or like let's say the Asian culture, unfortunately there are stigmas that exist where if you do look different, it can be a curse, nausea, it could be different things that unfortunately you're put in a category of person that doesn't belong, possibly, or doesn't deserve love in the way that it should be. So I think from an emotional point of view, that definitely exists, and that definitely makes you feel a certain way, especially when you go to weddings or parties and old aunties or uncles are coming up to you. And physically exists more because it's every single day. If I had to pick the two, I'd say actually physically,
the physical side,
because it's me
scary.
having to live with myself, look in the mirror every day, and that's when you get in your head, as opposed to the emotional where it's from an external source.
Yeah, and it's really strange, because once you get past that initial, that self-doubt, the world does open up and everything is fine, but just get that hurdle is massive.
Absolutely.
Now, someone a long time ago had written to me saying that her boyfriend's father has vitiligo.
Yeah.
And she wanted to know whether she could get it from her boyfriend. Now, I know that now when we say it, that just sounds like, don't be silly, that's not going to happen. But I think it's really important to actually say it out, because a lot of people, when you're in that situation, you don't know.
Yeah, and it's a completely fair question, right? Because when someone has vitiligo, people just get fearful and they think the worst. So you can't catch vitiligo; it's not contagious. So in her example, from having sex with her boyfriend, she won't catch it at all.
She won't catch it. And we have said that it could be that the boyfriend might develop it at some stage, because it could be hereditary.
Absolutely,
there is this thing. Is there an age limit to when you can develop vitiligo till?
Not that I'm aware of. I do think it can develop at any time. So I know people that. So I've met people that have developed it plus 50. I've met people that have developed it like as kids and then grown out of it, for example. And then I've met people like myself who developed it as teenagers. So it really is a mixed array. It does make you question, like how, why, who, what, where.
Okay.
But
the main point to that was that it's not contagious.
It's not contagious.
It's not something that you can catch from somebody.
Cannot catch it.
So now that you've sort of had time to live with it and sort of had time to also get past that initial sort of grief of almost feeling it, because it's a little grief for yourself to know that you're going to be different. Eventually you get to that point where you're like, yeah, I'm fine being different, but as a child we're not taught enough that difference is okay. I was just thinking, sorry, I'll come back to my question, but it's weird because when you're younger you're trying so hard to be like everybody else. And then as you get older, you realize the difference is great. So then you're trying to be different. And this kind of goes with everything in life.
It does.
So let's actually see if we can help other people who are going through this. When you found that you had vitiligo, and when you finally got to that point where you had a relationship, how early or late in your relationship did you feel it was safe, in inverted commas, safe emotionally to tell your partner about? Like, how quickly do you think it should be talked about?
So, when I had my first relationship, I think I was really fearful, and I needed to say it within I think it was the second date. I think I wanted to express it because I was just so scared about what the other person would think, and what that did for me, unfortunately, was create a lot of anxiety. So you can imagine even the first date, it's like, oh, this is going so well. Oh, but I've got this big secret inside. I don't want them to know about it just yet because it could ruin everything. And for a lot of people, that can just keep going. It's like a lie that you're telling yourself. Then, and it's not good to suppress things, by the way. Like, don't suppress that, right? The reason I say that is if I fast forward to that time versus, let's say, the more recently or the present, I don't know if I'd even say anything anymore. And that's weird, right? Because I'm saying back then I was fearful of saying, like, I've got vitiligo, whereas now I'm so comfortable with my skin. It's who I am. And that takes a journey. That's a full self-acceptance program that I put myself on mentally. And I think everyone deserves to have that chance to be able to give that to themselves, because you are who you are and you're beautiful the way you are. And your partner, whoever that may be in the future, should be able to see that beauty, and no doubt does see that beauty and unconditional love. So
But what would you recommend to somebody who's not quite there? Like, should they talk about it earlier on, later on? Like, what's best?
So my personal opinion is that I think it's not good to hang on to anxiety around holding on to something that feels like a secret like that. I'd say it's actually really good to be open, honest up front. Not that it's a secret to hide, not that you should be ashamed of it, but it's a part of who you are. And remember, it's a beautiful thing about who you are. So you celebrate it and say, I've got this amazing skin condition, called vitiligo, or a different visible difference that you have. And I'm more than sure that your partner, will be okay with it. And if they're not, by the way, then they're not the right partner, because this world is built beautifully, and you should be echoing that with each other.
If they're not okay with it, they're clearly not the right partner for you, no matter how much you think you are in love with that person.
No, exactly.
It's not going to work out, and
not.
hiding it is not going to make it suddenly okay.
No.
It just isn't. The next thing I want to bring up, and it may sound a little bit strange as a question, but how do you find one should disclose it? And I'll tell you, let me explain what I mean. So when people talk about, for instance, having a foot fetish, and they're like, okay, at what point and how do I tell the person? And, but I've also had people saying, well, my partner discovered that I had this foot fetish when I told them, they broke up with me, and so on. So, and my advice is always, don't make it sound like a confession. It's almost
really
like
good,
something is wrong with me.
Yeah.
This is not okay. This is weird. I need to tell you about something make it sound like something that you are offering, a little bit extra that you're offering in intimate terms, as something wonderful that will happen in your intimate life together.
Yeah.
So in the same way, I find that when you have, like when I was telling my husband about my facial hair, or maybe the first time that you mentioned to your partner about your vitiligo, it does come out almost like a confession. Like, okay, something is not right with me. I want to talk about this. Like, I want to tell you, in case you decide to leave me. Can we advise people, can we offer people a slightly different way of bringing up the subject so that it sounds more inclusive? It just sounds more positive rather than negative.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I love the examples you gave, by the way. It's so true. I think the way that we can automatically come across when we're different is we're come across negative, right? Come across like, oh no, we're about to impart fear onto our partner, and it's simply not true. And to your point, it should be something that's said to celebrate. You're adding something different to your relationship, right? But it's actually really positive because you're essentially advocating for your visible difference or vitiligo, and you're saying, hey, I'm different, but isn't this really cool? And again, your partner should see that as well. What's interesting about it is the affirmations you give off, you'd be surprised what you get back. So if you give off negative affirmations, you may get negative affirmations back because that's what you're saying. If you give positive affirmations, people like to reflect on what people say, right? So they'll be like, if you're saying, I've got this difference and I absolutely love it, generally people say, that's incredible, I love it too. If you say I absolutely hate it, some people may say, yeah, do you know what, I can see why. And it's so easy to get into that mindset. And
somebody's saying, yeah, I can see why you don't like this, just makes it worse in your own head, doesn't it?
It validates the negative thought, which is not right.
So saying let's just put yourself in that position. What would you say to your partner? Just how would you bring it up?
So, I'd say, listen, I've got something I need to tell you, if that's okay. Now, I find this really cool and really unique, but I've actually got a bit of skin difference called vitiligo. Now, I've had vitiligo since 15, but I actually dress around it. I really like it. I've got it on my eye and on my chest, and I just want to make sure you're okay with it. And that's me being as a human response and not rehearsed at all. And then I guess by me smiling and being okay with it and my body language, it'd be interesting to see how they'd respond, but that's all I want to give off is positivity.
You know what I loved about that comment over there was when Shankar said, I've got a skin difference. It's not a skin disease. And I think that's a really important thing for anybody listening to take away, that vitiligo is not a disease. It is a skin difference. It's a skin condition.
Yeah.
Could you call it a skin condition?
I'd call it, skin condition.
But it is not a disease. So I think that's definitely, that's one of the nicest words that I will take away from today's chat. I think it's really important to sort of mention that, and most people can actually see it on the face. So they, I've got a skin difference. I have vitiligo and I do have it over the rest of my body, and I'm okay with it. So hopefully you will be as well.
Absolutely.
I think that's a good way to say. Now, I want to now talk about how we can help partners to respond better.
Yeah.
So I think that one of the most important things that we can teach people is the vocabulary
Yeah.
around vitiligo. I don't think that we have enough vocabulary. Most people are still taught to stare,
Yeah.
or to kind of go, or to get sympathetic.
Yeah.
And sympathy is fine, but I think it's not necessarily what the other person is looking for at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
I can understand if I've been your partner for a while and I'm having a little bit of a meltdown because I feel I might be having a bad day. I might feel like it's growing a lot very quickly. There could be a million things that are distressing me. And at that point, I would want your love and maybe your sympathy. But when I'm telling you about it, or on an everyday basis, I don't want sympathy.
Yeah.
I just need it to be totally accepting of, I don't know, like I have acne, or I have pimples, or I don't know, my eyebrows have grown out of shape, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
So what advice can we give to partners to how to respond?
Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting question, right? Because you're looking at the opposing end now. So it's not about yourself, it's about your partner. And quite simply, really, it's treating them exactly the same as if they didn't have the difference. Although we celebrate it, so I guess to go into a bit more in detail, still show your partner, as always, affection and love. And sometimes they might need that a little bit more, because they may feel a little bit insecure at times, not always, but be consistent with showing up in that sort of way, because everyone's on a journey, right? And I'm still on my journey, even though I've accepted it, I'm still on a journey. And especially with vitiligo, new patches can appear all the time, which can reignite old feelings. But if your partner's there as like a backbone, as you both should be really, giving that love and nurture and affection, things like physical touch, that actually can be, for me personally, it can be quite a big deal, because sometimes that insecurity can sometimes ignite. And so something like that, so small, like a hand touch or something, can really go far. Another thing I'd say is what to avoid on that, for example, is no playful like names. I'd sort of avoid that, or taking the mick out of it, even if you're 10 years down the line. It's up to you, of course, but I'd say sometimes what may seem playful at the time can actually sit in the back of the head, and make someone, really go in on themselves, even if it's just a joke. And then the third thing I say, is that I get asked about my vitiligo all the time. And so your partner would get asked about their vitiligo all the time, for example. Sometimes you may be with them, and I'd say, and sometimes you won't be, but they'd still get asked about it. Whenever you can, back your partner. Answer those questions sometimes for them. If someone's about to go up to your partner and ask what they've got, but they're going to ask the question, answer it for them, because it can get overwhelming sometimes, being asked and asked and asked. And it doesn't shoot your confidence up, it can actually just wear you away, and you feel emotionally exhausted going through the journey.
Again,
reliving and reflecting and reliving. It's not always like nice, but they're the main things I'd say to take away.
I think that's a really good one. Yeah, I particularly like this point about not having nicknames for your partner based on their vitiligo.
Yeah.
Because at that point, it might seem really playful and fun, and you could maybe laugh about it 20 times. But there can settle a point when the person is feeling a little bit low about it, or not so secure about it, and the problem with that, it just multiplies the impact of that name a lot more.
It does, yeah.
And for no reason, it's not. You can't actually say, well, it's because this is how I felt. You just never know when your brain goes through certain little flips, and it can just feel that much worse, that you're picking that one thing that is a problem for me at this stage, and you've made it into a joke, and it's not really necessary.
Yeah.
There are plenty other things that you can have nicknames and jokes for.
It's like a vulnerability, right? It's just like a wound that's forever open.
Yeah.
Although it's not that, if someone exposes it all the time, and even in a playful way, it can be quite damaging long term.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you a very personal question.
Of course.
And let's see if we can actually really help everybody else with this. So when you discover vitiligo and you go through that whole journey of feeling scared, feeling numb, feeling like you hate it, and then coming around to accept that it's there. And that's fine, that's one journey. How do you, because this is a time now when you are going out with your body, which is, your body is telling a different story, a story that you didn't choose. And you now need to reclaim, after having reclaimed your mental space, your physical attractiveness.
Yes.
You need to get to feeling sexy and good about yourself with something that you've had to battle with to basically accept. How do you reclaim your sexual attractiveness?
Yeah, I think that's a really good
like
question.
Your sexual confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. When you get vitiligo, or when I got vitiligo, my self-esteem was to the ground. So that sexual confidence, couldn't tell you what it was.
Yeah.
It didn't exist. To try and reclaim it took years, because it's a like I mentioned before, it's a journey that you go on to help build your self-esteem up, and that could be journaling, reflecting, therapy, researching online, and I think one of the biggest first steps, for example, is knowing there's a community out there of other people with visible differences, seeing them celebrate it. So my first step to finding, reclaiming it, is find like-minded or people who are similar to you. Just because you know you're not alone, and it's important to know that you're not alone. Then taking another step, and you go for your reflections and your mental, let's call it mindfulness. And then again, you're building yourself up again to like another level. Then after that, I'd say things open up a little bit and your mindset will start to change. And for me, what I found comfort and expression in is fashion. Okay. So to reclaim my sexiness, I now dress around my vitiligo. I like being colourful, I like making it stand out, and I like being different. Now, I don't know if that's an age thing, because we talked before about how you get older and you want to be different. And I think it's important that every human being has the right to express themselves how they want to be. But for me, that's what I found as my expression. The second thing I'd say, and here's a challenge for everyone, is you may look in the mirror and not like what you see, but I'd want to wager a bet with you that if you got a professional photography sort of shoot done, and it's a weird one, but this is how I actually got to embrace myself and see it as something beautiful, you might see the beauty that's truly there. And I'd say that because although the mirror and a photography thing are, you could say, very similar, behind the lens, beauty can really be captured, and you can see yourself as you are, by the way, but just really brought out to shine. And it's a reminder to yourself, no, you are beautiful, you are sexy, you are deserving, you should embrace yourself for who you are, and anyone would be lucky to have you. But it's just like I don't know, it was a moment of realisation for me that made me bring out my confidence and led to all the things that you see before you.
Can I tell you a little story? So I was about 30 when I developed these bags around my eyes, and they're chronic. They've been there forever. And I was so conscious of this because, of course, these bags around the eyes don't really fit in with the traditional idea of beauty. And, they just weren't, they made me feel really miserable. They made me feel like I was less than somehow. And then I remember going for a photo shoot where I asked them to remove the bags.
Wow.
So that, in the photo shoot, I told them, I said, you can get rid of them. And I remember when these photos came back, they just felt weird. It wasn't me. I kept looking at them thinking, it's not me, that's not me. I was so conscious of these bags because I realized there's nothing I could do about it unless I get them surgically removed. I was so conscious that I realized that if I was smiling, the bags don't show. And so I would constantly be smiling no matter where I was. And sometimes you're sitting with people and they're telling you something quite sad, but you still got this on because you've kind of got to this point thinking, I've got to look the right way, I've got to look right. And you know what, it was so weird. And I think that day I realized that, okay, it's fine, I can have my bags back. It won't make very much difference to who I am.
Yeah.
And literally a few years after that, my daughter in primary school, no, she was in secondary school, I beg your pardon, was doing one of these things in gym class, one of these backflips, landed on her face, cut her eyebrow, and her upper eye quite deeply. And she still has half an eyebrow. And over time, we've kind of realized that we love her with that. It just adds so much character to her face. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that you can eventually get it. I was just wondering, like I said, for me, it's always just trying to find that helping hand with the first step.
Yeah.
To say, how do you get your sexual confidence back?
Yeah.
How do you actually think, what will it take for somebody to do this for me? Because let's be honest, getting your sexual confidence back, we might say, oh, we have to find it in ourselves. But really, it's very much about somebody else kind of making you feel that attractive before you can get to that yourself, in reality. So I was just wondering, like, if you suggested a couple of things, if we brought it down to one tip, like, what would that be if you just said, try this? Or this is a way forward to help you to just find that within you.
So, I mean, if I had to define it to one thing, I would say, for me to find my sexiness, it was doing that photo shoot. I'd literally say that was the game changer. Really bringing out the sexiness of who I am, who I was, and the world evolved around it.
Excellent. Photo shoots, in case that's what you need. And it doesn't just have to be for vitiligo. If you have anything that you're worrying about with your body, photo shoots.
It's a mechanism to celebrate who you are.
Yes.
Show the world.
Now, something else that I generally recommend, because again, when it comes to intimacy, and I'm not sure, okay, being a woman, I can tell you from a woman's perspective. You're going to have to tell me from the man's perspective. But we're so conscious of our body that we kind of create our own obstacles for our intimacy. Okay, I know that I've had women say to me, if their pedicure isn't done or if their legs are not waxed, they're spending so much of their mental state thinking about the pedicure that's not done or the legs that are still hairy or whatever, that they're not really focusing on their intimate moment, and obviously it is falling apart. And when you first enter that space of knowing that you have vitiligo in your body, it's a body that you're not still fully comfortable with, but you're going in there and you're trying to work towards that. Are there any rituals that you would recommend? You know, just to give you an example, we were talking to somebody who has been through breast cancer. They had to have a mastectomy, so that was removed. And in case you don't know what it feels like after breast cancer, it's not just that the breast is removed, but it's not just that, okay, physically you can't actually see anything over there, which was there before. And that's a big thing for a person. But also there's no sensation left there anymore because the nipples have been taken away and there's nothing there. And just to be able to look at that at some point and think it still has some, it's part of my body, it still means something, it's still important for me to be able to be intimate or feel the intimacy with that over there. And we have little rituals that we create for, you know, this area that has become not just looking different, but it has no sensation, and it actually feels completely cold over there now. Yeah. It's a terrible place to be, and so we have rituals that we create to sort of help people feel connected to their body again.
Yeah.
Do you have any rituals that you could recommend which might help somebody ease into their intimate moments?
So for myself, I guess it's two parts, right? So one where you do need to depend on your partner a little bit, and one for yourself. So the self one, for me, it may sound silly, it may not. I put on sometimes just a moisturising cream, but on my body, like the body lotion. And for whatever reason, it just makes me feel empowered. It makes me feel comfortable in my skin. It makes me feel good. And so that's my own personal ritual that I do, let's say, before I get intimate. Not every time, but it just gives you that nice feeling. But I think one of the most important ones, now I know we advocate for self-love, but then also as humans, we love to be loved. For me, what really made the biggest impact was when my partner would, let's say, kiss my chest, or kiss my eye, or my vitiligo on my back, for example, because it is a cold and dark place. Because even now, I love it, but I love it, but I'm not in love with it.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
So because my partner would kiss it and give it that extra bit of love that they love, that's what they love about you. It's an explosion of fireworks. I don't know how or why, it just does that mentally. And it's incredible, right? Because you talk about, I know you talked before in videos about arousal and things that turn you on and stuff like that. But that's like that's something deep, really rooted, as if there's a tree trunk right behind it. It's really footed to the ground. But then as soon as it gets kissed, it's like lifted up and you're floating in the air, and it's magical. Exactly.
Oh, so, that's so lovely. I like that. I like the idea that your partner at this point gives it that extra little bit of love, and they kind of make it feel special as well. And I think that's really, really important. I think ornamenting it, decorating it every now and then, it's great. Like you said, moisturizing, that's what you do. Perfuming it, maybe. I don't know, all sorts of things. But if you are struggling with your vitiligo patches, if you're struggling with how you feel about your body because of vitiligo patches, actually create a little ritual around the vitiligo patches. Give them that extra bit of attention, because maybe that's what it just needs. You know, and there are far too many people out there saying, oh, you should just be comfortable, don't make a fuss about it. Do you know what? We can feel uncomfortable about almost anything to do with our bodies. And I think making a fuss about it is just the nicest thing you can do to yourself. So one short life, why not? Enjoy that. So just to bring this to a close, what is the advice that you would give to your younger self if you had the chance to, if this was your childhood got it and you had the chance to tell yourself again, how would you deal with it?
Yeah, if I had to tell myself as a kid, I would really get into the head and say, Shankar, your difference is going to be your superpower. You're going to absolutely change the world. And for those people that are different now, that have any visible difference, you're all advocates. You've all got this special power to change and have a domino effect of kids, with adults, with parents, you name it. And so use that ability to change the world, because you have a gift, and it's the gift that will absolutely change everything about you, about others. And it's a beautiful thing to have.
I think that's lovely. And I certainly hope that a lot of young people will actually take that advice away from here. And if not the young people themselves, because maybe they're not the ones listening to this podcast, but if this is somebody that you know, if it's your child, if it's your sibling, if it's a friend, I would love for you to take that and help the other person through. Let that be your superhero moment, right?
Absolutely. Let that be a superhero moment.
Definitely.
I love that.
I mean, you know, you become their superhero for helping them through, but let that be their superhero moment as well. Thank you so much for joining me on this. I know it's not the easiest thing to talk about, even after years of dealing with it. I'm sure that it's, there are moments where you just think, well, I don't really, like you said, you're not in love with it. You don't really want it, but it's there. So I know how much vulnerability goes into these conversations. So I really want to say thank you for this.
No, thank you for having me, and thank you for allowing me to be vulnerable as well.
If you have any questions for Shankar about vitiligo, he can be reached on.
I can. At the Vitiligo Man, it's an Instagram page.
So we'll put it into the caption anyway, and then you can reach out with your questions, because I'm sure that there are people who have a lot of questions that I have not been able to respond to, and maybe you can help.
Happy to.
If you enjoyed that podcast, do as always, like, comment, subscribe. If you have any other questions, I am on info.seema.anand@gmail.com. And as always, look after yourselves, stay safe, and we will see you over here again very soon.
See you soon.